Praise to Faganism. Praise to Faganism. Praise to Faganism. Oh Fagin, dear Lord and Saviour, you've converted me. Please take me in your arms and hold me tight. So yeah, Chris Fagan has he's taken the AFL world landscape by storm. He's converted me into Faganism. He's converted the AFL community, the wider community, into Faganism. This man, this lauded figure, has completely turned around the Brisbane Lions to end up finishing second in the home and away season for 2019, and they finished, as you can tell by this video, in 5th place for the entire season overall. It really should be commended what this man has been able to achieve in the span of only 2 years. But before we break down 2019, as always, let's look at where they came from and have a look at the expectations coming into the start of the year. So 2018, by my own words really, was probably the best 5-win team in the history of the AFL. Brisbane had so many just close losses, it could be argued that they were probably better than a 5-win team. In fact, their percentage suggests exactly that. They finished the year with, the aforementioned 5 wins, 17 losses, and sitting just below 90%, which, considering only 5 wins and 17 losses, is an absolutely astronomical number given that feat. I mean, you only have to look at this year where there were 2 teams that had more than 5 wins, yet less than the 90% or close to 90% that Brisbane finished 2018 on. So it's just a testament to the achievement that Brisbane were able actually to get in 2018, and their ending position of 15th was probably a bit lower than what their season statistics kind of suggested. So coming into 2019, the expectations on the Lions were pretty varied from all commentators across the league. I think the highest prediction for Brisbane was sitting around about that 6th to 7th table, and all the way down to sitting in the bottom 4 still, although I think the general consensus for Brisbane was trying to push for a top 8 position. Personally, I had them sitting in 7th spot, and I had them finishing the year on 7th. Now, obviously, that prediction in and of itself, which was probably to the higher end of the scale with regards to most people's thoughts, was a bit low in retrospect. Brisbane actually managed to finish the home and away season in 2nd position. They had 16 wins and 6 losses and finished with a percentage of just below 120%. That's an 11-game turnaround in just 1 year. I mean, it really speaks for itself. And it also wasn't just a slow build throughout the year that Brisbane were able to maintain. They started the year off with a bang. Their first game was against reigning premiers West Coast, and a lot of people actually had West Coast probably rolling Brisbane despite it being played up at the Gabba. Brisbane would go on to win that game by 44 points and absolutely smashed the reigning premiers right out of the gate. The praise was probably not entirely put on to the Lions, as West Coast looked very sluggish after quarter time, having a shorter preseason as a result. But really, when you look back at it, especially considering the way that the year is finished, Brisbane completely deserved to beat West Coast at any stage of the year, let alone at the very start. They'd go on to win their next 2 games, one against North Melbourne and one against Port Adelaide, and of the two, they were expected to lose against Port Adelaide, as Port had kind of started the year off relatively well, and they'd carried on through their expectations from 2018. A loss to Brisbane, considering Brisbane's reputation, was not particularly great for Port. However, for Brisbane, it was absolutely spectacular because of Port Adelaide's reputation. Although the compliments were yet to be handed to Brisbane for winning games off their own merit, and instead it became a bit of a theme that they were winning games against teams that were just performing poorly against them. So Brisbane had won their opening 3 games of the year, and they were sitting pretty in second position only on percentage at this stage. However, they needed to come down to Melbourne to play against the Bombers, who themselves were touted to be a top 4 team, and they got flogged. Brisbane were never in this game. In the first quarter alone, they had 7 goals kicked on them compared to their own 2 goals. That margin never closed and only widened for the rest of the game. Oddly enough, the following week, being back at the Gabba, there was commentary around the Lions that they may be able to get over the top of Collingwood. So despite the commentary around the Lions of still not having the faith to win games against good teams, there was a bit of chatter around the league that they might be able to just pick Collingwood. That chatter lasted until about half time. It was a demoralising loss on the home ground. It was the biggest home ground attendance for quite some number of years, and they let down their home crowd, unfortunately, not for the first time this year. It was a good learning curve for the Lions though, as they rebounded against the Suns up in Gold Coast, and it should be reminded that Gold Coast at the start of the year were playing some pretty good footy. Another win against Sydney the following week, and the Lions were looking again to string some wins together like they had at the start of the year. Now sitting at 5-2, they were on a positive ledger. The following week, they returned to Melbourne and lost to the Bulldogs. The game had its ebbs and flows, and the score margin never really exceeded about 20 points, only for brief occasions. It was a pretty tight contest throughout the entire day. Brisbane kind of on top for the first half, and then the Dogs kind of on top in the second half, and that's kind of the way that the game sort of fell. Still, the Lions walked away from Melbourne with another loss. And given that Melbourne hasn't been a particularly great hunting city for them, it was running out of opportunities to be able to win away from home. Not to be swayed, and back at home they came up against the Crows, who was also another team touted to be a top 4 proposition at the start of the year. And were really quite expected to win this match, which is all the more impressive when you go back and look at the score worm and see that Brisbane came out victors by a solitary point. They would have to travel over to Perth to face the informed Fremantle, and at this stage, like many other teams that I've been talking about, Fremantle were actually pretty good at this stage of the year. It was before that their key position players kind of went down with injury, which again is all the more disappointing for Brisbane when they go down by 1 point and lose another game away from home. It's a bit of a trend starting to kick in for the team. In fact, this win-loss pattern would go on for another 3 weeks. Brisbane managed to beat Hawthorn. They played Carlton the following week and lost. After the bye though, things would turn around really, really well. The Lions would go on to win their next 9 matches in a row. Yeah, I don't need to sit here and tell you that that's impressive. Percentage boosting wins over St Kilda, Melbourne, GWS and Port Adelaide put them right back up into the mix for the top 4. Even actually, to be perfectly honest, top 2. Rounds 18, 19 and 20 were relatively close games, except for the game against Hawthorn, which was a 27-point margin, and their percentage didn't overly change too much, just steadily increasing, but nothing of real worthy note. Round 21 was against Gold Coast, but this time played at the Gabba. And following a 91-point win, The Lions took second spot from West Coast by over 4%. Coming into the next round, they faced first place Geelong, and they were on equal points. They were only being beaten by them on percentage. So they needed to beat Geelong in order to take the minor premiership with one round to go. And that is exactly what they did. After half-time, Geelong took complete control over the game. Really just before half-time, but half-time nonetheless. Geelong were in pretty well good control for the third quarter, never really allowing Brisbane to kick enough points or goals to be able to retake the lead. They were fairly comfortable, but you could see that the Lions were coming and they were attacking relentlessly. It wasn't until the last 2 minutes of the game that Brisbane got in front and stayed in front by a single point. They only had to back it up against Richmond the following week at the MCG because Geelong were facing Carlton down in Geelong, and they were pretty well certain to win that. So for Brisbane to retain the minor premiership, they had to win because a loss would not see them retain first spot. Richmond kind of dominated them in the first quarter, and from there, after the Lions had kind of settled their nerves on the MCG against Richmond, they pretty well matched them throughout the rest of the game. So Brisbane, despite a relatively decent loss, kind of proved to themselves and proved to the AFL world that they could actually take it up to a really top quality team in Melbourne, which is quite amusing when you consider the fact that they lost in Melbourne to the lesser teams in the Western Bulldogs and Carlton and Essendon throughout the start of the year. Despite finishing in second position at the end of the home and away year, Richmond finished in third position, which meant the rematch of only the last week of the home and away season would happen again, only this time at the Gabba, where the playing field would be on the Lions' home turf. For the first half, Brisbane were actually up for the fight. They were up for the finals intensity that was being brought by Richmond, but they were only able to maintain that intensity for a half of football. And after half time, Richmond flicked up the gear and Brisbane couldn't go with them. However, there is a caveat here that I do have to point out, and it is kind of Brisbane's own fault. They kicked 8 goals, 17 to the Tigers' 18 goals, 4. That's 22 scoring shots to Richmond compared to Brisbane's 25. So they kind of kicked themselves out of a preliminary final. Still, another home game at the Gabba, and this time against GWS, they had a really good chance to still be able to make the preliminary final. However, poor shooting for goal and a bit of a lapse in concentration cost them the semi-final as well, and Brisbane went out in straight sets. Still, really, on the back of the entire year, when you look back at 2019 for the Brisbane Lions, it really is a tick for success. Now, it's never a great position to be in to go out in straight sets when you finish second in the home and away season, which then raises the question, how are they going to go in 2020? And that's a really difficult question to answer. At this stage, before the trade period at least, I'm probably of the belief that they finish up around 5th, maybe. However, continued development, a safer home ground advantage, and probably better results away from the Gabba, they may in fact actually retain their top 4 position. It should be noted that Luke Hodge has officially retired now, and he was probably their best player in the entire final series considering his credentials. It's bloody Luke Hodge. And his voice will be very, very sorely missed on the ground as an extra coach. I mean, Hawthorn are still reeling from the loss of Hodge on the ground. To be perfectly honest, there's not really actually a great deal to say about Brisbane except heaping on a heap of praise on them. Lachie Neale had an outstanding season for them this year, which freed up Dane Zorko to be the most damaging he's been since probably 2015. Charlie Cameron was very, very clearly the best forward in this side, kicking over 50 goals, which is astonishing for a small forward in this day and age. And down back, obviously, Harris Andrews is probably going to be the premier backman for the next decade. Sorry, Alex Rance. This kid's going to be something else. And obviously, you know, Faganism. He's doing a pretty good job. He gets my tick of approval, for whatever that means. So if you're watching it, Fags, which you're probably not, good job, man. It's great to see what you're doing up there, and you keep it up, man. Oh, I'm giving a pep talk to an AFL Coach of the Year. That's what I'm doing. With regards to a rating of Brisbane, it's actually really easy to grade them. It's a very easy A for me. Coming into the year, my expectations were they would finish 7th, and if you include finals, then 5th, which again is still better than 7th. They looked like they belonged in the finals, or at least competing in the finals at the very least. I know they went out in straight sets, so you know, don't hold that against me, but they looked like they belonged competing in the finals, is what I'm trying to say. It's what I did say. Let me know what you think about the rating and the review overall for Brisbane. Was it a bit too positive? Maybe it was, considering they went out in straight sets. When you look at the year as a whole, I can't really discredit Brisbane for just going out in straight sets, considering they're not a team like Geelong that makes finals every year and just happens to go out in straight sets all the time. They're a team that's new to finals, really. And so the first experience of finals and going out in straight sets isn't entirely unexpected. However, next year, if they're in the same position and they go out in straight sets again, that's when the media and me will come down a bit harder on them with their expectations. Still, if you agree or disagree, let me know in the comments below. I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on how Brisbane went this year and how they're going to go next year as well. I'm very interested to listen to your guys' opinions with regards to that. If you want to talk about it more and more extensively, you can always join our Discord. The link will be in the description below, so go check that out as well. And by all means, if you did like the video, make sure you leave a big thumbs up. Subscribe, ring the bell if you want to see more videos that we're going to be coming out with. That'd be great to do. It's great support of the channel, and we really appreciate it. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.